Welcome to my monthly conversation with Konstantin. As you'll know, he's one of the most respected voices on YouTube about what is happening inside Russia at the moment. Konstantin Samoilov is a well-known YouTuber. His channel Inside Russia comments insightfully on Russia's descent into authoritarianism over the last few years. Now, like many, many others, he's outside of Russia with no idea when he can return. Welcome to Silicon Curtain. Please like and do check your subscription. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel because there have been reports of people being automatically unsubscribed. Let's hope that isn't actually happening, but do please check. Also, do check out the validated Ukrainian charities that appear in the description of the video. It's super important to help Ukraine remain resilient at this time. And once you've done that, do consider buying me a coffee to help support the work of the channel. Konstantin, it's great to have you back. And as usual, we've really had to pare the number of questions down. I had a list of dozens of questions, but we're going to focus just on a few topics today.
Thank you, Jonathan. As always, it is a pleasure and honor to be here. Thank you for inviting, and let's have a great conversation today.
Let's do that. And there's a lot of stuff going on, but I think the biggest one, of course, and this is perhaps the biggest change almost since the start of the full-scale war, is the purge, the apparent purge that has happened within Putin's government. Belousov is in, Shoigu is out, Patrushev, well, no one quite knows really what's happened to him. What on earth is going on?
To fully understand what's going on, we'd have to get into Putin's head. Okay. At this point, we can only guess a few things, but quite a few things are actually, pretty obvious. For 9 months, I was telling everyone that Russia was going through a process of sugarcoating. Russian propaganda authorities, officials, they were painting a picture that was much nicer than the harsh reality of what was going on in Russia. And then a lot of foreigners, a lot of people from the West, they actually fell for it. And they were saying, oh, Russia is doing great. How come nothing is happening? Nothing bad is happening in Russia. It was sugarcoating. And of course, the sugarcoating ended when Putin was announced the new president of Russia. Well, he was announced, he was even anointed to the throne by Patriarch Kirill. And at that very moment, sugarcoating was gone. That's it, not needed anymore. Things started happening. It's like a volcano is erupting in Russia right now, and every day brings us news. And of course, the biggest news were Belousov as the new Minister of Defense, Shoigu out, moves to the position of the head of Security Council of Russia, and Patrushev moves out of that position to become assistant of Vladimir Putin in shipbuilding. Okay, but Russia is become a very interested place in terms of things happen every single day. And if we spoke 3 days ago, I would have told you that that was the most interesting news. Now, I must say that another thing happened 2 days ago, day before yesterday, where General Ivan Popov was arrested. Russia's, allegedly best general, most popular with the troops, and he was arrested and placed in Lefortovo, KGB's highest maximum security jail. Okay, so that's quite interesting. Yes, Russia has been going through quite a few changes, but this is sugarcoating is off. Jonathan, we are up for incredibly interesting times in Russia. Economy, remember, we talk every month, and every month I've told you for the past, half year even, that Russia is in trouble economically, and economic tsunami is upon Russia. Well, this is happening now. Every single day, bad news come, and sugarcoating is off. So we are up to see so many changes in Russian politics, changing political landscape, economy, in Russian society, just you name it.
No, I don't even know where to start there. I mean, first of all, the coronation of Putin, the idea of one KGB agent anointing another. I mean, it's beyond farcical, of course. In fact, it's actually tragic to see that kind of pantomime show. And to those who don't sort of understand the illusion there, Patriarch Kirill, beyond almost any reasonable doubt, has been shown to be a not just a KGB informer, but an actual senior KGB agent. There, I would argue, is nothing spiritual about him or the higher, the hierarchy over which he presides. Popov is interesting because if you listen to some of the reporting around that, almost every military person in Russia is implicated in some grandiose corruption. So if someone gets prosecuted, it's not because they're corrupt. It's everybody is corrupt, but it's just that they've been picked out for another reason, whether it's treason or whether it's paranoia about potential mutinies or coups or whatever. We won't know exactly. But if they say it's corruption, it's not corruption, is it? Corruption is just a label. It's meaningless at this point.
Jonathan, you are right on. You see, Putin's Russia is based on corruption. Corruption is the crime that binds everyone together. You know, when you get into mafia, they put blood on your hands, so you can't quit, right? The same thing with corruption in Russia. It's the system built upon corruption, and everyone is expected to steal, you know. And if someone is charged with stealing, most likely it's not because of stealing. And as for General Popov, he is one of the few people in Russia who's not that corrupted. He's not super rich. Okay, he doesn't have much possessions, many possessions. He's has been having a modest life, and there have been attempts to dig his past, and people didn't really find anything. He's a modest general, basically. That's what he is, and he's charged with. I think this is a secret signal to everyone, okay, who is in the know in the Russian armed forces and the Russian government, charging him with corruption, okay? So it's a sign that you can be charged, any one of you can be charged with anything that you're not guilty of, you know? So that's quite interesting. I think that he is one of the least corrupted generals, and he can be placed in a museum in Moscow for exhibition of very few who are not that corrupted.
So we have to ask the question then, because immediately the media and many others, and of course the Z Patriots went absolutely crazy. They were like, Belousov, it's going to be a silver bullet. It's going to save everything. This is a genius decision. There are certain people who, of course, dissent from that. But what then is the number one criteria for why people are appointed and how they get close in the hierarchy to Putin? It's not competence, is it? I mean, it's clearly not competence. It's not whether they're corrupt or not. It seems the number one criteria is, do they represent a threat to Putin? Are they likely to overshadow him? Are they likely to plot his demise? In that respect, we have to assume that Belousov has been appointed number one because he's loyal and not a threat, and number two because he might have some individual qualities that might be useful to Putin.
Andrei Belousov is a very interesting choice for Minister of Defense. He is, well, I usually say this. He was born and raised in Soviet Gosplan system. His father was one of the Gosplan scientists, and Andrei Belousov started working for Gosplan at Gosplan system while Brezhnev was still the Secretary General of the Communist Party of the USSR. Can you imagine that? Now, Jonathan, this is insane, okay? And that man is placed as the Minister of Defense of Russian Federation. My theory, my observation is that Vladimir Putin appoints people, and at this point, he's the only one who makes decisions who to appoint. He is the one who builds this very fragile system of power balance in Russia, and this is his strength. That's what he's about. He's a genius at that. He's in the middle, and then he builds the system. He creates disturbances with the system, and he's the one who balances it out. He's the guarantor that the power groups will not kill each other, and this is his strength. So he appoints people for their loyalty. And if we look at most of people who run Russia, we will see that they go with Putin all the way to his younger years, even before he joined KGB. The brothers Rotenberg and Kovalchuk, Chemezov he lived in the KGB base right next to Putin. They were neighbors, door to door neighbors, and that man supplies 80% everything to the Russian the military industrial complex. If you look at who is running Russia, you will see that most of them, if not all, they come from St. Petersburg, from Sobchak's governor, the mayor office, and everyone. You held some kind of position and were close to Sobchak. So loyalty, that's what he appoints people based on. And of course, if they're a threat or not, if they're the threat, they're just not even close. They're not given the opportunity to get close to the vertical of power. And if they're a big threat, they're neutralized in one way or another. I mean, what happened to Alexei Navalny? What happened to Kara-Murza? What happened to former Russian Prime Minister Boris Nemtsov?
So Ilya Yashin is another one who's
Yashin. Well, Yashin, yes. Well, Yashin was also was becoming a threat. So it's loyalty, and if God forbid someone is considered a threat, even close, then things happen.
And it's another odd choice as well, isn't it? Because Belousov literally knows absolutely nothing about military strategy. In fact, he knows nothing about the military. He has not served in the military. So Putin's not appointing him with a view to turning around the military strategy. We have to assume that probably will remain relatively chaotic, actually. I mean, let's face it, there doesn't seem to be a plan to win militarily except repeat the same tactics over, with the added brutality of glide bombs and etc., and potentially Chinese weapons added into it. So it's just more of the same. So what is Putin thinking with Belousov? Does this demonstrate that he is actually more concerned about the state of the economy than he is about the state of the war?
This theory lays right on the surface that he's concerned about the state of the economy. He appoints Belousov to somehow make the war economy more efficient, to influence military-industrial complex. But you know what? From my experience, the theories that lie on the surface, they're usually not right. Okay, it's really hard to say why, because for one simple reason, Belousov is not going to change things around. Russian military system, defense, not just Ministry of Defense, but the entire country's system of defense/offense works in a certain way. And that has been working since February of 2022 in a certain way. And it's based on goszakaz. Okay, it's based on the government ordering things from the military-industrial complex. And if you want to make the system more efficient, if you want to make military-industrial complex work faster, cheaper and more efficient, then you need to change this system completely, entirely. You need to move to free economy, free market economy, within just like it works in other countries. Okay, again, it's not how it's working in Russia, and you just cannot do that during the war. That's the thing, because that's going to be a chaos. You can break the system apart. Yes, you can. Okay, I don't think Belousov has enough power. Even Putin at this point, is going to be real hard for him. But probably they could disrupt it. Okay, but then what's next? Russia does not have institutions that can step in and replace this. Private business has been under incredible pressure. The companies are being stolen left and right now, and then they want to rehaul the system. Impossible. Okay, now a second possibility: Putin sends Belousov to blackmail military-industrial complex, basically saying, "Hey, work faster and sell us for cheaper." Okay, that's also impossible, because I don't know if you follow Russian. Well, you do follow Russian news. Last Friday, Chemizov, the head of Rostech, Putin's oldest and perhaps closest friend. I mean, they were KGB officers living right next to each other. They were friends with families. The families hang out. This guy knows Putin for, the guy is in charge of the military-industrial complex. He's in charge of around 600,000 employees, I think. He's in charge of 20% of all entire spendings that Russia does on defense, not just on weapons, everything, including salaries, servicemen, and so forth. This guy is the czar of everything military, And then he comes out on Friday and he does a preemptive strike on Belousov. While Belousov is with Putin in China, he says, look, we're not doing that well. We're already selling our products much cheaper than we should. Our margin is 2.28%. We need to double it to 5%. There's no way we're gonna, decrease the cost. They're already too low.
And in fact, the costs are far
to
lower.
This guy, and I'm thinking, holy moly, that's quite a surprise to Belousov, who wants the military-industrial complex to, decrease prices. Yeah, right.
And of course, the prices are much lower than the US. If we look at the costs of producing a shell, of revamping armored vehicles, etc., the costs in Russia to do these things are far, far lower than they are in the US. The US has, and Europe has, a different problem there, which is the free market combined with administrators and our apparatchiks who are actually not very good at creating really tough contracts. The prices are inflated beyond anything that's actually reasonable. That's one of the problems of supplying Ukraine with armaments, is that it costs so much on the Western side to produce each bullet, each shell, etc. So Russia's already relatively lean, or obviously a lot of stuff's sucked out in corruption as well from each contract.
You know what? If you compare, let's say, bullet to bullet, then yes, it probably is much cheaper to produce, let's say, in Russia than in the USA or in the UK. But let's count entire combined spendings. Don't forget about Armata, that famous Russian tank that's supposed to be the best in the world. And I believe 250 billion rubles were spent. And armatas were shown on the Red Square, but it turns out that they were made out of plywood. Okay, and don't forget, and that's just one armata project. Okay, there are so many projects like that. For example, Russian Iron Dome system. air defense. That's the best in the world and probably most expensive in the world on paper. But in reality, it simply does not exist. So if you take all those costs and spendings and combine them, then Russian stuff becomes not that cheap anymore, you know?
It's vapor rather than real stuff. So if Putin cannot, and Putin and Belousov cannot improve the military-industrial complex through market liberalization, because clearly they cannot go in that direction. Everything's going in the opposite direction. They may be thinking, and I'm not saying this is going to work at all, they may be thinking along the lines of war communism, the kind of thing that Trotsky came out with, which is turning more and more and more of the economy to the service of the state, a kind of mass nationalization. Do we see that kind of trend going on? And then you combine it with, Stalin's technique to get stuff done, which is shooting people. And to an extent that works. So we're seeing it go in that direction.
We can, well, it's not quite there yet. The trend is, you are correct. The trend is that Russia is turning to that direction. But the thing is, here, Belousov would not have major role whatsoever. KGB would, because KGB is the agency would be responsible for forcing companies and regular people to work basically for free or for low pay, to work extra time, overtime, and things like that. So again, Belousov is not the key figure here whatsoever. And why Putin placed him? If Putin really thinks that Belousov can change things around, then Putin is absolutely delusional. I think there's a bigger plan here. It's just really hard to say at this point what the plan is. And by the way, Putin appointing Belousov and sending him to fix the economy, the war economy, to make it more efficient, it tells thing that we discussed so many times in the past, that the Russian economy is not doing good at all, okay? If they had enough money, then they would be spending more. Instead, they're saying, okay, it's time to spend less. See, that he admitted for the first time that situation in Russian economy is dire. Okay, so the big question is why? Why Belousov is appointed? And no one can answer that question. Perhaps it's to neutralize Shoigu. Perhaps it's not about Belousov, but about Shoigu. Because Shoigu had his own thoughts about things, perhaps, because Minister of Defense, if Minister of Defense, a real Minister of Defense, combining the power of controlling the troops and having power on military-industrial complexes, second strongest person in Russia. Well, second most powerful person in Russia, because the Minister of Defense gives orders to troops, to planes, to tanks. Minister of Defense is the one who controls the nuclear button, not Putin, because Putin can give an order, but it's up to Minister of Defense to execute the order or not. So the real control is with the minister, okay? And who knows? Perhaps Shoigu could sense that something bad was coming to him, and he has a lot of troops under his direct command. Shoigu, he served in the military, okay, and he came to the Ministry of Defense from the Ministry of Emergency Situations. That's like a quasi-army, okay? And he brought lots of people with him, and he placed them on key positions in the Ministry of Defense. In other words, Shoigu still has a strong team that is being destroyed right now, okay? But he still has the strong team inside the Ministry of Defense who listens to Shoigu. Perhaps that's the real reason why Putin decided to change the minister amidst the war that, going on in Ukraine. I mean, you don't do that. And he did. So that's why, Jonathan, that's why I say that it's in any way, no matter why it happened, it's really good for Ukraine.
Well, back to a phrase I think you used in our last video, which is bulldogs fighting under a rug. And that kind of seems to describe what we're talking about here. And of course, Shoigu's very close deputy was convicted of, or he had charges placed against him. I think it was corruption, but also treasonous charges, extremely, serious ones. That could have been a warning shot, and it kind of makes sense now, doesn't it? With this reshuffle coming, you take out or you send a warning to Shoigu by taking out one of his deputies, like don't mess up here, go along with this, or this could be you.
Two deputies, not just one, two deputies. The first one is Ivanov, in charge of all money flows. The rumors have it he's the richest Silovik in Russia, worth like $70 billion or something like that. And the second deputy, also one of the most powerful people in the Ministry of Defense, in charge of HR, placing generals in the positions. Okay, the personnel general or something like that. That's some kind of a.
That's a
That's
powerful
his
role.
name.
Yeah.
Right. So, perhaps Ivanov has officially been charged. That's very fishy. He was charged initially with taking a bribe of 10 million rubles. That's $11,000, right? No, not a million rubles. No, million rubles. That's $11,000. And then a few days later, it increased to 1 billion, which is $11 million. It's like, wait a second. Whoever was investigated needs to be fired because they must have made a mistake. And it's a big one, right? In Russia, anything goes. So, and then it just doesn't happen usually, okay? And then, of course, there are rumors rampant that he's charged with treason. We don't know that. That's just rumors. I have not seen one official confirmation of that. But something is definitely going on that we don't know. And Ivanov's arrest, everyone knew that he was stealing, that he was the wallet of Sergei Shoigu. Gosh, back in 2011, we were trying to build a power plant in Moscow region. And Moscow region is the territory of Shoigu. I mean, it's official, or at least it was the territory of Shoigu, because the governor of Moscow region is one of his people, so to speak. And we tried to make a bid, and we were approached by people saying, hey, what are you doing? You are not welcome here. We know who's going to construct the power plant. Don't even come close, okay? Okay, that's Russia, how Russia worked then. And and it's not just everyone knew that Timur Ivanov was in charge of everything. If you wanted to have something done, you would go and see Timur Ivanov. And all of a sudden, they arrest him and charge with bribe, like 12 years later. And this definitely, it's not the real reason. The real reason was to neutralize Shoigu, and the question is why? Why? Shoigu was convenient for Putin. Why did he neutralize him? Why did the question no one is asking is, why did Putin bring Shoigu to China with him and sit at the table with a new minister of defense? They don't get along, these two folks, Shoigu and Belousov. Why did Putin do that? These are, I love to look at these small details. They help me to connect dots.
And sometimes these things only become clear later. Sometimes they might even never become clear. But I think that those are fascinating details. It's like criminology from the height of the Cold War, seeing who's on the podium during the 9th of May parades. Well, something you mentioned earlier, which I think is really interesting. This is the next area we're going to look at. And this is economic problems. You talked about businesses being stolen. And I know we discussed this, before recording, and we kind of exchanged message about this. There seems to be some extraordinary cannibalization going on of the economy. And this isn't just turning it towards the military-industrial complex. This is people utilizing the situation to pull. I mean, if people are familiar with what happened to Bill Browder's companies and how they were sort of officially stolen from him, you were describing a scenario where this is happening all over the place. People are confiscating each other's businesses, and there's an uptick in, say, lawlessness and mafia-style behavior. That can't be good for the Russian economy.
Jonathan, I think that what we're seeing is beginning of the descent Russia into chaos, because Russia is up for grabs right now, and there is a list of 700 plus. I've heard the number of 770 enterprises that are targets for nationalization. Okay, and knowing how Russia works, I can imagine that if you want some company to steal from owners and buy off on pennies for a dollar, you go and knock on a certain door in Moscow and say, hey, I want this. And there are certain people sitting there and they're like, okay, these are our terms. You know, so much money right now, and then so much ownership after that. So there's a big trading going on. And is this good for the economy? I mean, this is the destruction. This is the destruction of the very foundation of the economy. Okay, um, it's it's really sad to see what's going on. But again, me and you, we've talked about it for so many times. Inevitable. Russia economic tsunami has many faces, and this is one of the faces. It's like I said, in Russia, in other countries, money buys you power, and in Russia, power gets you money.
That's something I realized back in the 90s, and it's very difficult to explain to people. Um, Very difficult to explain to people. And that idea sounds almost too simplistic to be true, but it absolutely governs everything. Once you understand that and get inside that idea, I think then you really start to feel that. At the same time, we're seeing labor shortages and an extraordinary figure. This is the last sort of question on the economy, at least. Gazprom has posted its first loss, I think, since the sort of privatization era. That doesn't seem to have got an awful lot of coverage in the mainstream media here. But to me, that is huge news, because Russia is a gas-inflated economy. If that jewel of the economy, if that jewel of the sort of oligarch class is no longer a cash cow, that's also bad news, isn't it?
Not just the bad news, but this is, I've been saying that Russia is facing economic tsunami. It's gonna, hit Russia soon. It's hitting later than I thought, but it's right here. We're seeing it right now. And this is basically the reason I was talking about the tsunami, economic tsunami, is just that, Russian gas and oil. That's the foundation of Russian economy, the bread makers. And you take those away, and then what is left? Russia doesn't produce anything. Okay, there are metals left. You can extract ore, sell it to China. And now Norilsky Nickel would like to move one of his plants to China. What's going to be left in Russia? Just extracting ore? That's it? You know, that's basically where Russia is going to. This is huge. Labor shortages, problems with China, Turkey. That you're right. The biggest problem is, of course, losing best customer Europe, and basically losing the bread makers, oil, natural gas, and oil.
And then when people are fighting over the scraps, it's going to get pretty ugly. And of course, we know that the equipment required
Jonathan,
to,
pardon, we've seen
yeah.
it before. We've seen it before. You've seen it. You were in Russia in the period when gas and oil trade was low, oil cost not as much, the fraction of what it's costing right now. And you saw what Russia was all about. You saw that with your own eyes happening. Wasn't pretty.
It wasn't great. And then when the financial crisis hit, I mean, things got pretty ugly in '98. You could feel the fairly negative atmosphere. I mean, I say that as an understatement. People were getting mugged in the street, and it was kind of horrible. And you also felt sorry for people because you had hyperinflation. If you were paid, you would have to get your pile of cash and you'd have to run across the street and join the exchange queue and get your money exchanged into dollars. Because if you waited for a couple of hours, it was devaluing minute by minute by minute. If you left it for a day or two, your wages would have halved, something like that. So it's extremely nervous times, and yeah, people struggle to get through, and yeah, we're right back at that place as well. But, and this is the last topic we're going to bring out, despite all of this chaos, it doesn't stop the Kremlin projecting its ambition, projecting its desire to influence other countries, control other countries, in some ways export Putinism, export the machinery and the process of creating autocracy. We see that being exported in Serbia, Hungary, Slovakia. We see that especially in Georgia. Putin is trying to create this Putinist mafia style autocratic environment wherever he can. And of course, things have erupted into Georgia. How far do you think, the hands of the Kremlin are on that trigger that has pushed this foreign agents law on Georgia? Because it doesn't seem to make that much sense for the Georgian Dream Party to bring that legislation back now before the election when everyone knows it was going to be immensely unpopular. This seems to me that it's been pushed onto Georgia for some reason.
Well, Georgia is a very obvious case. It's really hard to disagree with you saying that it's Kremlin's hand behind it. It's obvious. It's very obvious. Perhaps the Georgian Dream is pushing this law so hard that it knows that without it, it'll have harder time winning the elections. Honestly, I'm not an expert on Georgian politics. I don't know how this Georgian Dream can win the elections after pretty much entire Georgia went on the streets of Tbilisi and protesting. I mean, how will those people vote in the upcoming elections? For the cops who are beating them, for the parliamentarians who they're protesting against? Well, from what I understand, that this law is copied from the Russian law, and this is how the demise in Russia started with that law on foreign agents. And at first, it was not a big deal. It was not used. It was just sitting there, but it was a stepping stone in the grand plan of taking power and seizing and then just usurping power in Russia. And I think there's such a plan for Georgia. Obviously, European countries will not accept Georgia as a member of Europe with this law, and this is one of the goals that Putin wants. Sad. It's very sad. If this law is somehow passed, it was passed, as far as I understand, it's vetoed by the president right now. So we'll see what happens next. But that if it becomes law, then that's not good for Georgia. It's the beginning of the end. I mean, Georgia is doing great, but it's not immune to the totalitarianism. It used to be a part of the USSR, after all, And as of Kremlin's influence all over the world, well, that's part of the game for the Kremlin. The more countries it has under influence, the stronger its position. The more trump cards, no pun intended, it has.
Absolutely. And I've done four interviews with some of the leading experts and activists, actually, some of them very active in the protests on Georgia, and they're all saying, pretty much the same thing, which is this fight has now got to the point where Georgia Dream knows that if it loses the fight, then there's another Maidan, essentially happening in Georgia. So it's either autocracy or it's Maidan. Of course, if the Georgian opposition forces win, then that's another scenario, which is not necessarily the best scenario either, because potentially the Kremlin will want to come to Georgia to, liberate and rescue all those Russians who are oppressed in Georgia. And there are many hundreds of thousands now, and their rights are being threatened, of course. Not that any of them are inviting the Kremlin to come in and save them, but we kind of know how this works.
Well, let me tell you something. I am in touch with quite a few people in Georgia. Some moved from Tashkent Breakfast Club, our group here in Tashkent. Some people moved to Georgia to reside there, quite a few, and we're keeping in touch. Let me tell you, if Russia decides to help those oppressed Russians in Georgia and start moving in, those oppressed Russians would flee as fast as you won't even see them. They'll not be gone in a split second. And the Russians will come to Georgia. That'll be empty of Russians, okay? Because this is the worst nightmare of any Russian who have fled the war, who has fled the war. We have run away from Russia, not just for Russia to come back, to come to us eventually, okay? So, and Georgia was one of the safer places because of, it certainly opposed Russia. It never extradited Russians back to Russia, and it was considered one of the pillars of safety for us. Mm. And if it changes, tell you what, Russians will flee Georgia massively, very fast.
And one thing the last thing I want to mention there as well is, throughout this war and throughout Putin's authoritarian slide, a lot of people have asked the question, why aren't Russians protesting, etc., sort of ignoring the fact that one, unless you have a critical threshold, a critical mass, you place yourself in extreme danger protesting. But it has to be said, there have been many, many Russians on the streets with Georgians protesting very vigorously. I found that very heartening to actually see that happen at that scale as well.
That's absolutely true. And I know personally people who did that. And to those who ask, why aren't Russians protesting? I give them one answer. Look, right now, we all are seeing that what's going on in the Russian armed forces, okay? The generals, pretty much the best of the Russian armed forces, are getting arrested based on fake charges, okay? And most likely, nothing good is awaiting Ivan Popov. The chances are he will not get out of prison, or perhaps something will happen to him, fall out of the window or something like that, And then all the generals, the Russian armed forces is a club, right, where everyone knows, everyone, especially generals. They went to school together, they worked together, they meet each other all the time and so forth. So most of them are friends, right? And seeing that happening to one of their own and knowing that that will happen to them, and it's pretty much inevitable, okay? And even they don't protest, and they have all the means to protest, if you know what I mean. And yes, they're just keeping silent, approving. What do you expect from regular people? For regular Russians, they will not protest ever. Okay, so that's out of the question for me. Only something extremely extraordinary happens, like the USSR, back in 1991, that they protested.
And that takes a vacuum of power.
takes
You've got to have a vacuum of power. You have a chaos at the center. Then people,
unique circumstances, you
yeah,
know. That's then the last example, September 2022, mobilization announced, and there's a city, a town near Rostov-on-Don, and there's a picture that the main square, the town square, and cars pulling in, and they stop right next to two buses. One bus is with the police, and another bus is with mobilization officers. And parents get out of the cars, and families get out of the cars, and you know the young adults, 20-year-olds and 30-year-olds, they get out, they're mobilized. They were given summons, paper summons, and their parents bring them, their children, 20-year-old something, the 20-year sons, to give them to the hands of the mobilization people. Okay, they cried, fathers cried, mothers cried, those kids who were mobilized cried, you know, everyone cried, grandfathers, grandmothers, but they were voluntarily giving their children. After I saw that picture, I don't think that anything can happen that influence Russian people to protest or to stand up, to disagree, whatever. If they give their own children, sons, with their own hands, tell me what needs to happen for Russians to change their attitude towards this whole situation. I don't know.
I don't know either. It's yeah, I saw those same pictures. I've seen the interviews, especially tragic in villages where see people can be very naive as well, and actually some of them are genuinely patriotic. They think they're doing the right thing, and it's awful. It's awful to see that happening and to know that they will never return. Um, as usual, Konstantin, huge pleasure talking to you. We've covered a lot of topics. I think we've really uncovered a lot of interesting sort of information, I think, for the audience in this discussion. We always do, but it is very much appreciated.
Jonathan, thank you so very much. As always, it's been a pleasure, and looking forward to our next conversation.
Definitely. Thank you so much.
Thank you.